Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm really excited to dive into this office hours for us all to learn about how to work less and earn more with strategic goal setting. I think we can all benefit from the content that's going to be shared today. So, as I'm sure you all know, a core goal of Dreamers and Doers is amplifying you and your journeys, and intimate educational sessions like today's, filled with insights thanks to your fellow members, are the perfect opportunity for us to up-level together. So before we officially begin, I want to share a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. Between her time in startups and running her business, Frenchie has worked with over 12,000 entrepreneurs. She has seen the difference between thriving businesses and those who are barely getting by. From having sold out launches to spending more time with their kids, Frenchie empowers her clients to achieve their biggest business goals without falling victim to the business grind. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Frenchie. We are so excited to learn from your expertise today. We know how valuable your time is, and we're so grateful to you for investing in the Dreamers and Doers Collective in this way.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and see some familiar faces and some new faces. And I'm excited to dive into this conversation. I'm going to close the chat because it's doing that thing where it blocks my screen. So Hannah, you let me know if I need to respond to anything in the moment. Otherwise, we'll talk about other questions a little bit later. But for now, I just wanted to I always do an intro slide because not everyone does intros quite as well as Hannah just did. So I'm always sure that I have something to warm everyone up, but I'll do a quick intro on myself. So I'm Frenchie. I'm a growth and marketing strategist for experts and creatives. I specifically don't call myself a coach because I'm too bossy to be a coach. I'm less on the exploratory side, and I'm more just do this. Let's carry on. So that's kind of my approach. I used to work in startups. Most recently, I was the head of community at The Wing, which was a women's co-working space in New York City for 2.5 years. I still live in New York City. I was born and raised here on the Upper East Side. I still live on the Upper East Side, which is a crazy thing for me after years of being I'm never going to be that person. I have 2 little guys. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. My husband's a chef. He's Italian. I love cheesy bread / any carb cheese combo, I'm pretty on board with. Also, I just love TV and helping people work better. Specifically in the TV world, really I love a medical drama. I love a legal drama, The Good Wife, that sort of thing. Sometimes I go for the, trashier things like Love Island and that sort of thing. So it kind of depends on my mood, but I really like to run the gamut. Generally just don't like anything scary or anything very violent or gory. I'm a little bit of what I would call an online business curmudgeon in that I'm always kind of going on personal rants about the space and all the kind of BS things that happen in it, but I'm also very much a part of it. And so I don't always know how to reconcile that very well. Because I think that it's also helped so many people like me and a lot of you on the call really start to find and grow their own business. And my goal is always to help entrepreneurs really feel in charge of their business. And when I first left The Wing and started this business, I was oh yeah, strategy. Everybody needs strategy, all that. And what I started to realize is that as I got more familiar with the space and what people were offering and selling and all those things, there was so much information and so much valuable information on how to do different tasks, right? How to make reels, how to excel on LinkedIn, how to build your email list, how to, write your sales page, all sorts of different tasks, but no one was really teaching people how to think cohesively about their business overall, which was driving so much overwhelm and burnout for people because it just became this game of tactic whack-a-mole, a better term, that was getting people kind of going in circles and feeling very stressed out. So that's a little bit about me and why we're going to kind of dive into what we are going to dive into today. So on today's agenda, we probably saw this in the title slide, but this presentation is called Stay Close to the Money. And Stay Close to the Money is this kind of philosophy that I've kind of came to after I saw what I saw. And I was people are just doing a lot of work that's really far from their end goal, which is the revenue, right? All of us want the money, but when we're spending so much time, I don't know, setting up a sauna, something or other, that's not Not saying it's not important, but right, there has to be that balance. So we're going to do a little bit of myth busting. I'm going to talk you through the 4 superpowers that I want all of you to have. Then hopefully we'll have time for all of it. I think we will. We'll dive into one of my favorite tools, which is something that I call your revenue roadmap. A lot of people have done some version of this. Most people don't rely on this enough, which gets in the way of achieving your goals. And then we'll talk about how to really lead with your goals so that you can achieve them more easily. I'm just gonna take a look. Oh, sorry. I use consultant or strategist. I kind of go back and forth. I was just catching up on the chat, but either one works for me. As long as, like I said, it's not coach. Not that there's anything wrong with that. People call me that all the time, but that's just not how I identify. So as Hannah mentioned, I've worked with 12,000 plus entrepreneurs. I've scaled multiple startups, and I've seen really obvious differences between more successful businesses and less successful businesses. And the ones who were successful were obsessed with working better over and over again. They were always coming back to their work and evaluating and reevaluating what they were doing, why they were doing it, how it was working, how it wasn't working, and how they could improve and iterate on it. So they weren't like constantly pivoting, but they were actually just continuously optimizing and iterating, which made a big difference for their end results. So from that, I kind of developed this core business belief that how you work matters more than what you do. And what I mean by that is that I've seen people be endlessly successful on LinkedIn. I've seen people be endlessly successful on Instagram. I've seen people endlessly successful with just an email list. I've seen people who only go to events to market their business, and that is all they need to grow their business. The thing about it is how you show up for it and how consistent you are with it is far more relevant and important and impactful on the top line and the bottom line than exactly which strategy it is. And I always use this example of this like archetype that I once identified, who I named Software Sally. In Facebook groups for different courses and programs that I was in, people would be like, my email list just crossed 1,000 people. And then Software Sally would come in and be like, what email service provider were you using? And I'm like, that's not really the most important question here, right? That's a side note, right? The most important question here is, how did you get to 1,000? And we tend to kind of focus on all the like different tools and like the constellation of solutions rather than the core work, which is actually driving people to your list in that example. So why is it so hard to sometimes do the right work, even when we know what it is, right? So these are some of the like, I want to say myths that I see floating around a lot in the online space and kind of in the world in general. So work smarter, not harder. I'm sure we've all heard this one. If it's important enough, you'll make time for it. Also, I'm assuming that everyone's heard this one. And you need to spend money to make money. Probably have heard this one, likely when someone is trying to sell you something. So to me, this is kind of bullshit. And there's a couple reasons for that. I hope it's okay that I'm cursing. I'm sorry if there's children who are hearing this, but I have a potty mouth. These are really nice ideas, but they're like a compass with no magnet. They totally mislead you. Like, what does it even mean to work smarter, not harder? There's so much room for interpretation from every single person. You're out there being like, I just need to work smarter, not harder. But sometimes when I feel like I'm at my least smart is when I end up being the most effective. So like, how do you reconcile that? When I'm kind of like out of thinking mode and just in doing mode, that's when I see myself really moving forward. And so I really want to start by reframing some of these ideas. So just one thing to note is like, you really don't need other people's advice. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get it. I think it can be really valuable, but you still need to have that core anchor. And in general, the answers that you really need for your business, and this is not in like a wooey way, like in a, like soul connection or anything like that way, just very tactically, most of the best answers for our business are in front of us, and we just need to learn how to decode them, right? And what I mean by that is they're in our customer behaviors, they're in our feedback that we're getting, in our testimonials, in the content people are interested in engaging with. All those sorts of cues and messages that we're getting are really giving us the answers we need to help us grow our business, achieve our goals, and really pursue the outcomes that we want. So here's really how I like to reframe it. So instead of thinking work smarter, not harder, focus on doing the right work, doing the work that works. And that is information that you have, right? We have seen what has worked for us in the past and what we can do more of and double down on, and what hasn't and what we can let go of. If it's important enough time, you'll make time for it. My general belief is like, you'll never have time for everything, right? Like that's just math, physics. I don't know. It's just facts. It's just true. But you can maximize your time. And when I say maximize your time, it's actually rather than feeling like I have to do everything, it ties back to that idea of doing the right work. How do you make the best use of the time that you have? How do you invest your time wisely into your business? And that doesn't mean that you need to invest all of your time, but one thing that I've seen a lot is that people will, like when I started this business, was kind of a nap time business, right? And so I had maybe like 3 to 4 hours a day to work on this business. And I was really committing myself to 3-ish hours a day of work. But I've also seen people who are trying to grow nap time businesses and they're loading themselves up with like 40 hours a week of work, but they don't have the time. And it's not because they're broken and they're bad at time management. It's just because the math doesn't add up, right? And so it's really about being as smart as possible within the limitations of what you have. And then you need to spend money to make money. It's really about making the right investments at the right time. And when I first started this business, I signed up for a course that was a great course. I learned so much out of it. But one thing I observed was that there were so many people in this program who were not really where they needed to be in their business to actually get any real benefits and ROI from it, right? And so it's not that there was something broken in the program itself, but what I realized was kind of broken is that people don't really get the tools they need to learn how to invest wisely in their own businesses, right? And we're in this culture that creates a lot of responding to like reactiveness to marketing messages rather than proactiveness around understanding what your business needs. So how do we do all these things, right? How do we shift away from some of those myths and start doing all these things? So these are what I've really identified as the 4 superpowers of highly successful business owners. And this is something that I've seen people in the online space who are really successful do really well. It's what I saw in startups, and it's super streamlined and it's super straightforward, but it's also so important and like very easy to bypass, right? So the first step is analyzing. Looking, like I said earlier, looking at the information you have to use your insights and inform your strategies overall. To use a personal example on this one. So I once, I think when was it? At maybe the end of last year, I hosted a kind of coffee chat, open Q&A. I was curious if like I could kind of invite people to a workshop that was a non-workshop and was more just open hot seats. I had like no one RSVP. So like, all right, I guess that's the answer there, right? That's not of interest to my people. So it doesn't make sense for me to try that again. Then more recently, I guess at the beginning of January, I hosted a workshop. It was a 3-day workshop. It was called Fuck Manifesting, 3 days to maximize your revenue. And I had like so many RSVPs and signups, like more than I had ever seen, right? And so if I'm like now thinking about my next launch and strategizing for my next launch, I'm using that information to help me kind of inform my next step. So yes, I will be hosting that again because clearly there was an interest and a demand for it. So really starting to look at that information. I think that the analysis piece is like it's not about the math or the numbers so much as depersonalizing a lot of it, which is like, it's not that people don't like me or they think my idea is stupid. It's that for whatever reason, it didn't resonate with them and a different idea resonated more. And that was, just one example of that. So the next piece is then using your insights to inform the work you need to do to achieve your goals. So this is often the biggest gap for people is you'll see some sort of data point come up like, oh, wow, I haven't really converted anyone from Instagram into a sale, just as like one example. And then like, you'll keep really doubling down on Instagram. And it's like, well, maybe that's not the right strategy. Maybe there's different ways, or maybe you need to shift how you're doing Instagram or there's a million different variables and possibilities, but it's about how you connect it all, right? So letting your insights, letting the facts and information that you have from the past inform your path forward is really, really just doesn't always happen. And it's not something people really like talk about a lot, but is like, it has been game changing for me and for my clients and just for people who I've seen like shift away from following, like I said, that kind of cookie, like what are they called? The crumbs of like tasks, and actually focusing on like the path forward. So once you kind of have strategized, right, then it's about prioritizing, because the thing is like whatever famous sayings, the best laid plans, blah, blah, blah. Like you can have the best strategy and then like you get sick or you have a last minute opportunity to go on a really fun trip. Let's make it like a little bit more of like a fun reason to, break your strategy, or you get new information that something isn't really working or any of those things. And you really need to start to prioritize. So, when my kids are sick, typically my week becomes a little bit of a wash or a less effective week. So I need to choose what's the bare minimum. And I really start from the bare minimum, not from like, any higher goal than that. What is the bare minimum that I need to do to move me closer to the goals that I have? The other part about prioritizing is partly about doing the right work. And also making the right investments at the right time, right? So this is when you start making hiring decisions or coaching decisions or program decisions. But those decisions are very clearly linked to your strategy and not the other way around, right? So we don't build our strategy around investments that we want to make. We build kind of our investments around our strategic goals and priorities. And then the fourth part is monetizing. So once you have all of that, then it's really about that execution and iterating so that you're consistently doing the work that works. And this is like painfully true, is that the only way to make money in your business is to execute on the strategy, right? Is to do the work. That's so obvious, but also so kind of like one of those things that we forget, because it's like, well, I have this financial goal, and like people will procrastinate and procrastinate and procrastinate whatever you want to procrastinate, and like procrastinate walk your dog, and then suddenly you're like, wait, why isn't it happening? And it's often because no matter how amazingly you've done these three parts, analyzing, strategizing, prioritizing, you're not doing this last part. So they're highly correlated and interrelated. But people who are hitting those really big financial milestones, who have that work-life balance or / like just aren't working 1,000 hours or 1,000,000 hours a week, like are doing these things in this way to really drive them forward. Any clarifying questions on this right now?
Emily dropped a quick question in the chat. She was just wondering which course you took.
So this is like when people are like, it rhymes with Bappel. But it was it was a very well-known course about making courses. And I do want to I don't want to go into like whose it was or anything like that, because it was a very good course and there was so much to gain from it, right? But when you individually don't know exactly what stage your business is in, and like whether it's the right time to say launch a $300 course, which requires a really big audience, those were the kinds of like considerations that really I started to see. Or some of the recommendations in that course were to make like a 250 slide webinar, which again, most people who are working by themselves and don't have a team just don't have the bandwidth for. So it's more considerations like that, but I just want to be cautious that the course itself was great.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So how do we start to implement this? And obviously we're not going to be able to implement all of this in the time that we have, but there are some places to start. So the first is really defining your goal and setting your revenue goal for a set period of time. I've worked with clients, like I worked with a photographer client recently. She's currently in Montana and is for like 3 months, because her goal was not to make more money. It was to maintain her revenue and actually work significantly less and be able to go to Montana for 3 months. But for most of us who are running businesses, the core goal is a revenue goal, right? That's like the key outcome that we're going for. So that's why I'm leading with that. Then you want to build out your revenue roadmap. Then that's when the superpowers come in, because you build your plan to hit the numbers, right? And the actual tactical and measurable outcomes that you want are really laid out in front of you. And then you do what I like to say is stay close to the money. So you're consistently checking in and asking yourself, is where I'm spending my time helping me hit these financial goals? Is that moving the needle on where I want to be? So do you have an example beyond revenue for this 4-step process? Yes. So it could be time and how many hours a month you want to work. It could be that you want to hit a certain revenue target without launching anything new or creating new products. It could be that you want to do it in 3 months. If you have something specific in mind that you're like, I would love to hear, because sometimes it's easier for me to like adapt to that. Okay, well, feel free to DM me, because what I want to do now is a little bit of a quick roadmap builder. Hang on. So you want to focus on business development. So 100%. So all of this would be then really focused on leads and number of leads or number of collaborators or partners or affiliates. However you're defining business development can be that end result that you're looking for. The one thing that I'm always conscientious about is like, are you focusing on business development pure? Like, if at the end of the year you have 30 new leads in your pipeline and you've sold $0, is that what you want? Or are you actually hoping that 30 of those leads will convert, in which case revenue still is the goal? So we think that that's just to be conscious, is like, what is the key end outcome that you want to get to when you're doing this work? All right, so we are all going to take a couple minutes. This is a super quick exercise just to fill out, hang on, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, a revenue roadmap little template that I have. So hang on, I'm just going to drop it in the chat. And let me know if you have any trouble opening it. Then I'm going to share my screen again. All right, can you all see that? Okay, and were you able to open your own copy? Okay, cool. So the way this works is like, this is pretty simple from an Excel perspective or a Google Sheets perspective. So what you want to do in this tab is just drop in your offers and their prices. So let's just say you have a group program and that's $2,500, and you have a one-on-one offer and that's $7,000. And let's just say those are your 2 offers. 3 is something I put in here. I typically never recommend that people have more than 3 offers unless there's like different things going on. So this here is just to put in details about it. Hannah, do you mind sharing the link with Mez back in the chat, the link to the spreadsheet?
Yes,
Thank you.
Oh, Teresa has us covered. Thank you, Teresa.
Oh, thank you. So this would be your group program. This would be your one-on-one. And maybe the group program is like 4 months, weekly meetings. Okay. And then one-on-one is 9 months, and it's weekly meetings and Boxer, right? This is like not thought out in any particular way. So then on this next kind of roadmap, what you want to do is just plug in again the name. So group program, and then your one-on-ones. And one-on-ones, all right. Oops, all right. I get stage fright when I'm like typing and I have a shared screen. It's like a real thing. Okay, so what I like to do is I start to use like data from the past if I have it, or, you know, just reasonable judgment to start filling out the number of clients that I would want to buy into these things over the course of a year. So let's just say my group program is a launch-based program and I'm launching twice this year. So I would put, let's say I'm launching in April, I would put 10 people, and then I'm launching in October and I would put another 10 people if those were my goals. So what happens down here is it starts to generate your it starts to calculate the money that comes in. And then maybe one-on-ones, my target is to bring in 1 new one-on-one a month. Again, I'm just doing this as easily as possible for me. And I would say 1 per month because last year I did like let's say 9. And so one per month this year would make sense. So I would say like using that evidence. And so what this starts to do is then you get to this total calculation of $127,000 for the year. But more importantly, when you're, staying close to the money, what it starts to do is like when you are getting into February, rather than thinking about, oh, I need to make $7,000 in February, or like, oh, how close or far am I to $127,000? You start to actually just like look at how many clients do I need to bring into what offer, and let that really guide you more than, a lot of the other things that might either come up or distract you or anything like that. So I want to give everyone time to fill this out. If you're in a place where you're like not exactly sure what your offers are, like definitely don't worry about it. I mean, just plug things in so that you can start to see. I think it's really important to see things like if you're charging $250 for something, how many clients it actually takes to hit that like larger revenue target. And then as you're evaluating this, there's some considerations that I always like to bring up for people. So one is like, is 10 a realistic number? For example, and if you're like, no, but I need to be making more money than this, that's when you can start to go back to the offer and be like, well, maybe my group program could be 6 months so that I can bump up the price a little bit and not have to sell it to as many people and still start to hit the revenue numbers that I want. So letting the number of clients that you can work with and the price inform each other actually works like really nicely. And we tend to forget to do that because we're just like, what should the price be, rather than like, what's the value? How many people can I deliver it to? And that sort of thing. So I'll give everyone like just a couple minutes to fill this out. I don't think that it should take super long, but feel free to ask questions as you're working through it. Sorry, Morgan, I'm looking at yours. How do you handle situations where you don't have a flat rate fixed fee? And the lifetime spending per client is yes. Love that. So I do this in a couple ways. So one is that I tend to think about if you have like, so first of all, that's one thing I just want to clarify. I look at this as like booked revenue, not as cash in the bank. So that's like one kind of key piece. The second way is if you have some kind of average or a minimum, then I'll lead with like the minimum. So if I know that minimum is $5,000, that's actually the only thing I'll drop in here. And then I'll kind of like know that I have wiggle room to adjust as the year goes on if some bigger deals come in and some don't. It does get trickier, which is why I think, especially for people who work in corporate consulting, it gets like harder to project because you're like, well, wait a minute, like it could be a $10,000 retainer, it could be a $50,000 retainer, and like I don't know. So the other way that you can do it is actually to set targets of like how many of each like price point would, like low, medium, high would be ideal based on your bandwidth in a given year. Because I imagine, have you ever seen that? I think it was like a YouTube video of the like professor who put the stones in the jar and then he put the sand in the jar and then he put the water in there. And so it's like, I think of the bigger projects as like the stones, and then you have like the sand projects, and then you have the water projects. And so there's a little bit of, I would guess on your end, just like some MacGyvering to kind of figure out like, because you can probably take on like one big project and 2 medium projects and one small project, or 3 small projects at one time. And so thinking about it through that lens. Cool. All right. I'm going to give everyone like 1 more minute. You can keep working on this as I keep talking, but then I'm going to switch back to the slides. All right, I'm going to stop share here. I'm going to switch back to slides. Okay. Oh, actually, I realize that there's a lot of people off camera, which is totally fine. But is it okay if I do like a quick little screenshot of the screen? I always forget to do this. And then I'm always like, damn it, I should have like done a screenshot so that I could share it on my Instagram. Is that okay, Hannah?
Yeah, if anyone is comfortable with that, like feel free to keep yourself off camera or hop off camera. And if you aren't comfortable with that, keep yourself off camera.
All right, cool. All right, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. All right, cool. So let's come back to this. So what I want to do is, like I said, we're not going to be able to walk through this for everyone. And I know I'm sure not all of you finished the spreadsheet and all those things. But what I want to start thinking about is like, as you are looking at the numbers that you created, what can you start to do to streamline your path to actually like achieving them, right? What information do you have? What has led to, so in terms of analyzing, some good questions are like, what has gotten you sales in the past that you could just do more of that might lead to quote unquote double the sales? So let's start there. Do you want to, and if you want to, let's use the chat for this. Like anyone want to share things that have worked really well for them to, that they've learned work really effectively in their business? I'll share one, which is, I'll share one just to kind of get things going, which is that I have a subscribers only podcast, and that has worked really well for lead generation because I bring in guests, and because it's subscribers only, then it drives people onto my list, which is a far more effective way than a public podcast, which is like, maybe I have listeners, maybe I don't, but I don't really know. And I have to like do double the work to convert them. So that's one thing that I know from like a lead generation perspective has been really helpful. And so then kind of like following the thread through these, from a strategic perspective, that means like, okay, I'm going to spend more time on that, right? I'm going to invest my time and energy in that because it's helping me with that kind of top of funnel growth. So on a given week, like right now, I don't have any specific help, like a podcast manager or anything like that, but that is something that is kind of on my roadmap. I'm like, I think I'm going to need help with this, especially as I try to do more of it. But I also always, when I have podcasts, when I have the seasons running, up and running, like that's always top of the priority list for me, is to make sure that the episodes come out, that, you know, the guests get all the assets and all that stuff that they need. Okay, Lisa, I like that. Authentic, informative email marketing works for you. So how has that worked for you? Is it like nurturing? Is it sales specifically? What's been like the impact of that? Sorry to ask more questions. The reason I'm asking is actually because I'm like, okay, well then, does that mean that you should be doing the same amount of emails and follow the same pattern? Or let's just say your emails are really high converting and you've seen that you have a click-through rate that's like very high. Strategically, does that mean that it would make sense for you to expand how many emails you write? Or are you actually spending more time on more list building activities that would drive more people onto your list? People act on your sales, CTA. Got it. Okay. So you don't focus on sales much. When you do, yep, that totally makes sense. Right. So I would see something like this and I'm like, okay, so I think depending on, I mean, I would need to know so much more about your business to give you like a correct answer, right? There's so many variables that come into play, which I say because I think that a lot of times, like, we lose the nuance of businesses in so many of these like binary teaching models. But Lisa, just looking at this, I'm like, okay, so if people act on it, then probably, and they like your emails and you're already seeing the click-through rates that you want, then I'm like, all right, this seems like an opportunity to bring in more people into the top of funnel, because then you kind of know what your overall conversion is going to be like. So if you double your email list, you'll probably double your sales when you do give people something to buy. So always thinking about that, like through this like journey and kind of what happens at the beginning, middle, and end of that customer's time with you. Teresa, offering to provide pro bono guidance mentorship through networking orgs to build my leads. Okay, so that's working really well. And Teresa, I know you were talking about business development goals. So my question for you is, what do you do with those leads when they are in your world? Are they then, do you have like a nurture strategy where you're getting them to buy? Are they just kind of in your world and referring you to people? Kind of like, what's the, or do you not know yet? Like, those are all good answers. I'm always just curious to ask those follow-up questions.
Instead of writing a bunch of stuff, I think I'll just
yeah, that's totally fine.
So I think I love the term nurture strategy, but I think so far it's been either direct conversion to a sort of one-on-one consulting mentorship support. I'd love to grow that in a to build more of a referral, third-party recommendation. But that's kind of how it's been working so far. So I'll see somebody post a question or something like that, and instead of responding in a chat, I'll just say like, would love to spend 15 minutes. I think it'll be easier for you to understand if we just kind of talk through it this way. Here's my calendar. Let's schedule some time and really try to personalize it that way, and then kind of convert from there.
Got it. Cool. Okay. So it sounds like it's working from there. I mean, it sounds very time intensive. So then I think the only question is like, are you charging enough for that like top of funnel to be working that way, right? Like when you do, and I don't know how big your deals are or not, and it depends a little bit on your business. I would say if it's more corporate clients, then it probably makes sense. But if you were the person who was selling a $500 course, I'd be like, that's like a lot of hand holding to sell. Adelaida, so you have your assistant constantly contacting lead generations and sellers of our products and have them schedule a call with me. I offer to, interesting. Okay. I'm curious to hear more about what your product is.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, so we have a company that fractionalizes real estate investments. So
Okay.
I just have her contact realtors, and we have a referral program where we give up to 5% commission. So it's like a very much win-win. And I think I'm closing like 99% of them because it's like we need help finding projects. And then once we find them, we need help selling them, and we'll give you higher commission than you usually get. And you can sell just $100 or $1 million. You don't have to do the whole thing. So it's easier. And everyone's like, sweet, sign me up.
I love it. That's great. And so if you have such a high conversion rate, then is your goal to focus on like bringing in more of those people?
Yes, that's why I have my assistant constantly booking me.
Yeah. And I guess my question would be, over time from a scalability perspective, because it sounds kind of like that's like the world that you're in. It's like, are there other ways to contact or gather those lead generations and sellers that don't require all that one-on-one? Is it like a monthly office hours or one of those things that would help you be able to do more things and also connect with all these people?
I'm starting to record my calls because I'm just getting started. So I'm like doing them myself first. Yeah. So I can tweak it, see what works, see what I like, see how to start. And once I'm in a good place, I'm just going to record them and have my assistant get on the calls for me. And it's in Colombia, so it's like $4 an hour. Totally worth it.
Cool. Got it. Good for you for recording calls. I mean, I record calls, but I've never been able to like watch a replay or listen to my own voice recorded without just feeling just like so. And this is from someone who has a podcast. So I'm always impressed when people do that. That's great though. That is great. Yeah. I mean, that's a super, it seems like high touch, high reward, which like makes sense. Cool. I just want to make sure that I have that I leave time for also just like general overall questions that are beyond like these things that I talked about. So if you have questions about that, I'm totally open to taking them. I want to be as of service as possible. But as you can tell, if you have a question, you can drop it in the chat, but I probably will ask follow-up questions. Not one. All right. No one has specific questions, then I can do some we can talk through some, what I would call, this is one of my favorite things to do, like case studies. Oh, hang on, I saw a chat. Like effective lead generation for designers. Okay, we can talk about that for sure. Let's talk about that. And then if we still have time, then we'll do some case study type stuff. All right, so Emily, what kind of designer?
I'm an industrial designer. I do product and packaging design.
Okay, cool. And so your target clients are typically like larger organizations or smaller?
I work actually for the last 12 years or so. I've been working primarily with startups, VC backed high growth startups.
Yeah.
Before that, I worked in-house at consultancies working with the Fortune 500s.
Yeah.
I had occasionally one of those in my independent consulting.
Got it.
But all my work has come through word of mouth. I went to one conference last week and had something kind of interesting come out of that, but nothing immediate. So yeah, mostly I'm still working on personal networking and like within the communities, but haven't sort of branched out beyond that.
Got it. Okay, so I think a couple kind of thoughts that come to mind. So one, you mentioned a lot of VC-backed companies. I feel like everyone wants to be like in VC's like, key network of like referrals, but I do think that that's like, it's like the level up of word of mouth. And so I'm going to assume that you're doing that, but maybe not. But I think that that's one way. So it's to actually expand your VC network, which I feel like as someone who worked at a lot of VC-backed organizations, people listen to their investors more than they listen to, like, let's just say the director of product who's like, let's hire this person to design our product, unless it's like a personal referral or something like that. So I think that can just be a really effective way to kind of like jump over that a little bit. I also think that there's probably a world in which this is like a longer lead thing, right? So I don't know if you're like, I need more clients tomorrow, or I'm like just looking to kind of open up the pipeline. Is there a way for you to do what you do for some, like almost in a pro bono way, potentially for like a really high visibility, whether it's like a nonprofit or something like that, that would just kind of like expand your reach? I think that things like that are actually more effective than press, because press people can like talk about you, but I get the sense that like what you do is very tactile and just requires, like, it's not like a web designer, right? Where someone can just like see all the websites they've made and just make a decision, but there is like a little bit more of that like physical interaction required. It also doesn't have to be pro bono, but it could be, discounted or something like that. I'd be curious to also like do some almost like market research, connecting with people. I don't know like who in an organization would typically be the person to hire you. But whoever those people are, really start to understand, or, even do like some direct market research of like, what's challenging them? Like, what do they struggle with when it comes to making those choices? And I think that's where you can then create either like roundtable conversations or host some sort of like events around those topics to help to navigate that. So what I think is tricky is that probably most people who hire you, it's always a longer lead process. I don't think that people are like, oh, we need this for tomorrow. Like, we're going to start tomorrow. So I think it's about really building yourself up a little bit as like a thought leader beyond just being the person who's like potentially showing up more transactionally in people's worlds, and you're like actually creating opportunities for people to get to know you so that you're top of mind for them if and when they need your help or someone they know needs your help.
Yep.
Is
Thanks.
that helpful?
Yeah, definitely.
Bye, Melissa. Okay. Anyone else have personal questions? No, personal to our business. I mean, you can ask me personal questions too, but like, no guarantees on what I deliver on that side.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, so I have a full-time job, and then on the side I've been running this like online course that came out of a university course I taught. And so I
cool.
view this as like a new business, and
Mhm.
I'm kind of like trying to figure out the offers to offer, because like I've taught the course once on Maven, and kind of just tapped into like my network of people who are interested, but I didn't create like any sort of large audience or like sales funnel. But through that course, I had some people who just individually wanted like almost coaching. Like I teach on DeFi and crypto. And so they just were like, I just want like one-on-one calls. Can I just like pay you for that? So it's been helpful, but I'm kind of in like the very early like analyze stage of trying to figure out like, do I run the class again? Do I create it as like an evergreen product? Do I like, just work on building my audience and then think about what kind of offers to like relaunch? Because to your earlier point, I don't have like that much time, and it's not like my full-time business, but I would love to turn it into like a more profitable like side business that I can kind of like have a good ROI on like time and efficiency. But the course has already been like built, so that it's easy to run it again, but it does take the time of like running a live cohort and basically getting students in the door, which I think is actually far harder than teaching the actual class, is like trying to build the pipeline.
1000%.
So yeah, I don't know if you have any advice just from being very early.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably spend 80% of my time marketing and 20% of my time on delivery, right? So it's definitely, that makes sense. So I think that I would actually start to work backwards from the time you do have, and more importantly, the time you want to dedicate to it, right? Because there's probably like a difference between the time you actually have and then how much time you would actually want to spend on this. Evergreen courses can be great, although if you sell it live, it's kind of harder to sell it evergreen just because you would need to show up a lot. Bye, Katerina, nice to meet you. But what I would say for you is to really start to look at who the audience was that came in and then kind of what their commonalities are, because if you want it to be almost like a scalable side hustle, like quote unquote passive income. I say quote unquote because like never really passive. It's just like all
still very
things.
active, but yeah,
exactly. But if you want it to be something where it's like exactly, then it's really going to be very much a lead generation game, and that it's really going to be focused, I think, on new marketing. Because, well, sorry, quick question: what's the price point of the course right now?
$499.
$499. Okay. Yeah. So it definitely, for you to make quote unquote real money on it, you need to sell it to a lot of people. So the questions that I would consider are, one, would it be as valuable taught not live, or are there ways to have like the content pre-recorded, and so that's sold evergreen, but then there's like a monthly or bi-monthly office hours with you where people can ask questions, so that rather than needing to do that one-on-one coaching, you're just like showing up at specific times, but all the like tactical information is getting delivered. That's one way to look at it. I think that you would need to like try a couple different iterations of how you deliver it to like really firm up what works best for your audience and what's going to be compelling to them. And then the last thing that I would also think that is, how are you consistently building your audience and your either your list, your social media following, or anything like that? Because that's going to be like the real effort here. Is like, sounds like you're an expert in the topic. You can always play around with formats and sell it to people, but you need to know and have enough people to sell it to at a given time. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you.
Of course. Cool. I know that we are coming close to time. Hannah, I just want to like make sure that I'm following all the rules.
Yeah, no, this was great. This was so great.
Thank you.
Thank you for answering all the questions that came in. And yeah, definitely feel free to share where everyone can
Oh
continue
yeah.
following
Sorry.
along if they're interested in learning more.
Yeah, I have a couple freebies in my podcast that you all can join and sign up for. I would love to see you there. I'm also on Instagram quite a bit. So you can follow me there. Sorry, I'm trying to find my other link and it's like all blacking out. Oops. Hang on, I'm just gonna stop share for a second. That's gonna be easier. But this has been so wonderful and fun. And you can feel free to email me with any questions or anything like that. There we go. There's the other one.
Yay, amazing. Yeah, this was so great. I know a lot of members are dropping their feedback in the chat. I'm also going to share our official events feedback form. If you want to share more thoughts there, we're always super excited to hear your feedback. So that is available to you. Thank you so much, Frenchie, for this. This was really
Thank
fun.
you.
I know you
I'm
mentioned
so glad.
at the beginning when we were chatting, like you wanted to make it fun, interactive, and engaging, and I feel like that was accomplished. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining and asking such great questions and
yeah, thank you all.
present. And it's just such an honor to learn alongside everyone. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one.